Here are 7 counterintuitive ideas that sound wrong, but are actually right for a fast growth small business. Number 1, spending money is more important than saving money. You've got to get good at spending money, not saving money. When you're a small business, you don't have much money, so there's not a lot to save. If you're a big business with millions and millions of revenue, if you can save money, then that widens your margin and you're more profitable. Happy days, that's a great idea. But if you're a small business that wants to scale up, you have to spend money effectively. You've got to get good at boosting posts with ads. You've got to get good at hiring contractors who can add some value to your business. You've got to get good at spending money on ways to promote and do marketing. You've got to create some ways to spend money on good quality content. So there's all sorts of ways that you can spend money. And the hard thing is not saving money. The hard thing is finding the smart ways to spend money. But that's what you've got to do. So every single time I've scaled companies, it's because we got good at spending money. First time I scaled a company to $1 million, we got really, really good at running newspaper ads, and we got good at collecting those leads and turning them into sales. In another business, we got really good at Facebook ads. In another business, we got really good at scaling the team and hiring the right people and bringing them on board. So what you have to get good at is finding the way that you spend money to make money. Idea number 2 is that revenue is more important than profit. Now, everyone says the old saying, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash flow is king. I get it. I've heard it 100 times myself. But the truth is that it doesn't matter if you're highly profitable if you're doing 50 grand a year of revenue. Let's say you've got 50% profit margins on 50,000 worth of revenue. Okay, great. You'd still be better off working at Starbucks. What you have to do is get those revenues up. You've got to get those numbers up into the millions. What normally has to happen is you've got to get revenue high enough that you can afford a great little core team and the marketing budget to promote the business. And then once you've done that, you can then focus about widening those margins. It's often the case that most businesses have fixed overheads that just have to happen, and then you've got your gross margins, and the gross margins really don't kick in until you've got high enough revenue to cover the fixed overheads. So you have to get the revenue up. You obviously can't run out of cash. That's the rule of the game, but you must, as quick as possible, get your revenues up, even if it means that it's not wildly profitable. Idea number 3 is improving cash at bank is better than keeping really accurate records. When you're growing fast in those first few years, the number one number that matters is what's the cash at bank. And what we're looking for is to make sure that the cash at bank is at least stable or hopefully growing. But in reality, and unfortunately, that's one of the only numbers that you're going to have access to that's live, that's real, that gives you real peace of mind or sleep at night factor. So that cash at bank number, that's the main one, because you can't run out of cash. You must make sure that your business always has enough cash to stay in business, and you've got to keep an eye on that number. The problem is with fast growth small businesses, a lot of the other numbers, by the time you get the numbers, they're outdated. By the time you get the numbers, your business has moved on. There's not a lot you can do with those numbers. It's time consuming to get those numbers in a small business in many cases. So a lot of the time I see people trying to analyze these tiny little numbers that don't make much of a difference. They're not really projecting much forward-looking stuff. They waste their time on that stuff, and ultimately their business stalls. As opposed to what I've done when I've scaled my businesses is I've kept my eyes on cash at bank so that I know that I'm safe, but then I just focus on getting more money in the door, right? So I win business, get those payments in, make sure the cash at bank goes up, and that's my number 1 number that I'm looking at. Number 4, BandAid Solutions are better than well thought out systems. Isn't that a silly idea? Of course, you should have really great standard operating procedures, and you should have a system for everything, and you should outsource to the Philippines and make sure that they've got 101 systems, and you should have a Dropbox folder full of amazing systems, and everyone should follow the systems. Not really, not in the beginning. When you've got a fast growth business, a lot of the time a BandAid solution is better than a well thought through solution. What do I mean by that? A BandAid is something that's cheap and fast, and it works and it stops the bleeding, and then we can move on. Now, when is it time to systemize? It's time to systemize when the business is starting to establish the best practices. In the early days, you want to actually remain pretty flexible in the way that you do things. You're trying to figure out what are the best practices. You're trying to find out a new and unique approach to getting things done in a faster, better, cheaper way. So if you're too rigid with your systems, you're not going to discover those better, faster, cheaper ways. With BandAid Solutions, you're focusing on moving forward as fast as possible. Let me give you an example of a BandAid solution versus a well thought out system. One of my first businesses, we were told we should have a very detailed CRM system, and that we should systemize our CRM system. And what we ended up doing is we ended up with a cardboard box for leads, a shoebox for appointments, a shoebox for presentations, and a cereal box for sales. And what we did is whenever we had a lead, we stuck it in that box, that physical box. And then when we made an appointment, we literally put it into the next box, and then the next box, and the next box. And then down in that cereal box, was all of our filled in sales forms that we'd written by hand. And I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous. Literally business cards and handwritten notes going on one end and sales that were written on a piece of A4 paper down the other end, but that got us through our first 7 figures of revenue. What a crazy system. But that was our CRM system, and we got to 7 figures of revenue in the same period of time that most people are still trying to figure out how to set up their CRM system. Okay, so the next one is that a brochure is more important than a website. And what do I mean by that? Well, in the early days of business, people are not going to be searching for your business. They're not going to be going to try and find you online because there's not enough people who even know you exist. What you need to do is be going out and reaching out and talking to people, be outbound, and in many cases, sending through a PDF brochure of what it is that you're doing that really talks about your product, and it's a beautiful brochure. In many cases, that's going to be more effective than a website. You're going to reach out to people with an email attachment and say, hey, I'm launching this product or service. I'd love some feedback. And you're probably going to get more engagement that way. Also, you might be meeting people face to face in the physical environment, sitting down with them and having a sales conversation. In that environment, you don't want to pull out a computer and distract them. You want to put a brochure and be able to flip through the pages. Now, I get it. Everything happens online these days. You can have a digital brochure. You could have a slide deck. But what I'm saying is, rather than spending 15, 20 grand developing a website and having an all singing, all dancing website that no one looks at, I'd rather that you focus on outbound sales and putting something that really is about your product and your service in front of people so they can evaluate your offer and that you can actually talk them through it and hopefully make some sales. Number 6 is that the only brand that really matters is your personal brand, not so much your business brand or your product brand. It's the way people tick is that they fall in love with personal brands. They love names and faces and people, and they want to get to know you personally, and they're going to trust your business if they trust you, and they're not going to trust your business if they don't trust you. If you try and be invisible and sit behind a business brand or a product brand too soon, no one's going to get to know you, like you, and trust you, and no one's going to do business with you. If you flip that and say, forget about the business brand and the product brand for now, it's me personally, it's my name on this product, right? And it's going to be me who you get to know, like, and trust in the early days. I'm not saying that that's the way to scale up, but it's certainly the way to get those first sales through the door. People get to know your face, your name, your brand, your reputation, and that's why they buy from your business. Number 7, passive income and automation are the things that are going to send you broke in the early days. Obviously, as you're scaling up, you want to automate things and you want to build some digital assets that perform whether you're there or not. But in the early days, the idea that you're going to be able to make a passive business that runs without you, that operates on autopilot, it's way too soon to be thinking about that. In fact, the people who are the best at automation, the people who are the best at creating assets, are the people who get their hands dirty in the early days. Every great entrepreneur that I know who's built a multi-$100 million business or even $1 billion business, they're not at all afraid to get their hands dirty. They go out and talk to customers, they get face-to-face with customers, they get hands onto their systems, they do handwritten things if that's what's required. They do things that don't scale before they do things that do scale. So what I want you to do is ignore the idea of passive income and automation in the early days, focus on doing the difficult things that don't scale, and then figure out how to make a scalable version of that. So I hope you've enjoyed these counterintuitive ideas. These are the ideas that are right for small startups that are getting off the ground. They're in their first 7 figures of revenue. It's often the case that you will hear a mentor who's got 10 million of revenue sharing what's working for them, and it's different when you're at the beginning of the journey. So we covered a lot in that video. What did you like the best? What was the idea that stood out the most? Leave me a comment below, give it a like, give it a subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.